the hell is wrong with you? The only thing that's ever been consistent in my life is that question. Welcome to the ADHD Untangled podcast. My name is Rosie Turner and I'm an accredited ADHD coach, yoga and Pilates instructor. But ultimately, I'm just a human being who knows what it feels like to live with ADHD. And after having 8 failed driving tests, impulsive decisions to get married and then divorce before the age of 27, and having an inability to handle any form of rejection, I've decided to dedicate my life to supporting the ADHD community. And this podcast will cover the 2 things that I love to talk about most: movement and ADHD. You will hear real life stories from real people living with ADHD. You will get advice from wellness industry and ADHD experts. So what are you waiting for? Let's get untangled and show the world what we are made of. Hello, Untanglers. Welcome back to another episode of Tangled In with me, Rosie. And today we are all tangled up in chasing highs. Yes, chasing highs, a topic that many of us ADHDers can deeply relate to. And I've always really resonated with that can't stop, won't stop kind of ADHD. That restlessness and that pursuit of wanting more and doing more all the time. And I always say life before my diagnosis was actually just a life of seeking more of everything, seeking more love, achievement, more substances, more highs, whatever you want to call it. And it was actually this that eventually led me for my ADHD diagnosis, because it was when, I had sought everything I possibly could that I thought was going to bring me happiness, addictive behaviors, in relationships, in work, you name it, travel, everything. And I got to a point where I felt like I tried everything and chased every single high, and I was still deeply unfulfilled and not happy. And I couldn't understand why I continued to live this life of extremities, wanting one thing to the other, and why I couldn't just, be satisfied and nothing was ever enough. So this is why I'm so excited to talk about it today, because as soon as I learned that ADHD had a huge role to play in this, I've instantly been able to give myself more compassion. And not only that, knowledge is power. So now I understand what my brain needs, I'm able to work with it a lot more. So today I'm going to work through obviously some of the struggles and just highlight them and how they might show up for us with ADHD. And then we're going to work out, why does this happen? Why do we, have this really intense need to chase more highs than people without ADHD? And then also, what can we do about it? So some personal experience and some of the coaching questions and tools that I use with clients, I'll be sharing today. I want you to leave listening to this episode with empowerment, really, to also look at how can we channel this, impulsivity, this need for desire and need for more into more positive areas of our lives, and, use it as our strength. Because I truly believe this, whilst this can be one of the most detrimental parts of my ADHD, it's also led me to some of the greatest things that's ever happened to me. So let's move on. Let's start with the struggles, and there are many. So I've just made a list here of a few things that come to mind, but food and drink, not being able to moderate, is one of the ways in which I can really see this show up. For example, I was always so bemused by people, especially say in the workplace, where they would have, say, a packet of wine gums, biscuits or chewing gum, and they're able to just have them at their desk for weeks. And I would be like, if that was in my view or on my desk, they would be gone within the hour, if I was lucky. So that constantly to binge eat or have and consume whatever is in front of us instantly with no moderation at all. And even now, if someone offers me a chewing gum, they give you one. I'm like, what's one going to do? I need more than one chewing gum. But I also know this is definitely to do with the chasing highs and needing more of everything. But also, I think there's some stimming involved in that too. Then there was the same with alcohol, right? So I could never just drink at a slow pace. There's always that impulsivity to keep continuing to drink fast. Again, really putting us in situations where we're going to be more prone to having quite negative experiences when it comes to drink. Even when it came to my nicotine, right? So I haven't hid the fact that nicotine has been one of the substances that I have struggled with the most when it comes to, that need for a high or that addictive behavior. And even when I started vaping, most people were having one vape a day. I was having 2 vapes a day, all day, every day. And it wasn't out of my mouth. So it felt very, very extreme. And then love, I was hyperfixated on love. And I shared this in our first episode of this season, really going intense, hyperfixating, hyperfocusing, which is why I ultimately said yes to things like a proposal in Vegas and got married. And then 2 years later got divorced. It's that restlessness and that need to chase that high that is in front of us, that we have to have it now. But all of these struggles have something in common, is it wasn't just in this extreme way of wanting more of it. What this actually led me to do is also the extremes in the other way. So, for example, I was consuming lots of food and lots of drink, or I was not eating at all, having an eating disorder, or going sober. Chasing love, for example, either all in or all out. So being all in a relationship or being single and going celibate. So I think as well, this need to chase highs led on the outside to look like a life of complete extremities. And my dad often used to say to me, you just keep going making U-turns in your life. 1 minute you want to be doing this, 1 minute you want to be doing that. And it made no sense to me, and it made no sense to anybody else. So if you relate to this, then you are in the right place, because this is now where I'm going to tell you that you are not greedy for wanting to eat the whole packet of wine gums. There is nothing wrong with you because you feel like you are unable to control this intense need to chase substances or love or achievement in the way you do. Because listen to these stats. Individuals with ADHD are 5 to 10 times more likely to struggle with substance abuse. In our relationships, we have a double the divorce rate. We are more susceptible to impulsive spending. Eating disorders, we are 30% more likely to struggle with binge eating disorders. And it's not just that, it's in the addictions that we celebrate. We are also more prone to work addiction and exercise addiction. And whilst I don't have the exact stats for work or exercise addiction, this is something that recently, obviously once we sort of work with those bad addictions, these addictions that we celebrate, like work and exercise, is something that I've come across to struggle with more recently. And all my friends around me with ADHD, I can see it within them. This is something that we have to constantly monitor, keep ourselves accountable for. And I know that my friends that have been to work addiction, like meetings and stuff like that, she said the room is full of people with ADHD. And I was recently actually diagnosed with something called HA, and I'm not going to try and pronounce what that means, but this is where an individual who overexercises and undereats, so a woman who overexercises and undereats, might lose her menstrual cycle because of the extreme behavior around exercise and not fueling ourselves enough. So I would love one day to understand what the stats would be for individuals with ADHD and HA, because my guess is that the correlation between exercise addiction and ADHD is going to be huge. And when you look at these stats and you understand that, how real the struggle is, the impact on an individual's happiness and contentment in life is going to be so impacted because of this constantly chasing something, this happiness, the happiness trap that doesn't exist. And no wonder we see that life expectancy stat of around a decade. We are more likely to lose a decade off our life with ADHD than those without. And I think this part of chasing highs and needing more, whether it's substances or, how it plays havoc with our relationships, even, again, work addiction, because that can lead to loneliness and deep unsatisfaction in life. That plays a huge role on our mental and physical health. So this is why this is so important to understand, accept, and work with. So let's go into why. Why do we have this tendency to chase highs in the way that we do with ADHD? So first and foremost, it comes back to dopamine. Now, we know individuals with ADHD hold lower amounts of dopamine. So there's dopamine activity going on in an ADHD brain. Now, it's debatable, and it is said that it could be because we, are unable to retain the dopamine that we gain in our brains in the same way a neurotypical might. Or it might be that we actually absorb less when we do get our hit of dopamine. But that is still debatable, and we don't really understand fully why this is happening. Now, what is dopamine? So for those of you that may not know what dopamine is, it is a neurotransmitter. And most importantly, what we need to know is this chemical is a chemical that we receive for reward and pleasure. So, for example, when you eat that chocolate, when you have sex, or when you go on that run, anything that feels pleasurable, that is dopamine. And that is a chemical of reward and pleasure. And that's why we always want more of it, because it's that feel-good chemical. But the most important thing to know about dopamine is it is really responsible for motivation. So we really need dopamine in our lives. And there was actually a study, and I think it was on rats, that was done around, they took the dopamine receptors out of their brain and they put the food in their cage. And because the dopamine receptors they didn't have them, they basically just didn't go and feed themselves. So basically, we need dopamine to survive. Otherwise, we wouldn't go and eat or go to work or, go and function like a normal human being without dopamine. So that's how important dopamine is. And when you think about that motivation side of things, you can really see if the correlation between dopamine and ADHD is so strong, that why, again, we have this intense need to chase it. But also on the flip side, if we are struggling with lower levels of dopamine and we find ourselves procrastinating and unable to motivate ourselves, that also explains that side of ADHD too. So it's really, really important. And what I'm going to share today should really, leave you with tools and insights into how to manage that. Another thing around dopamine that I want to mention is what's changed in the way that we live right now when it comes to dopamine, and why there's so much talk about it at the moment, is originally we had to work hard to get dopamine, and, we had to go and hunt for our food, for example. And what's happening today is we can have access to dopamine. Now let's call it bad dopamine or quick hitting dopamine with my clients, literally without leaving our bedroom. So, for example, if you pick up your phone and you go on TikTok or Instagram and you're vaping at the same time, you're getting so much dopamine without leaving your bedroom that what would be the point in getting up, going for that cold shower, going for a run, going to work, that you're not going to be bothered because you have got all the dopamine that you need sitting there in that bed. And the fact that we can do that means we are getting a completely different kind of response to the dopamine. And instead of it making us feel good, we're actually feeling worse from it, because before we had to go through pain to gain the pleasure. Whereas now we are actually using dopamine, like we're so scared of pain, like we can't even withhold pain anymore because we are so used to having constant hits of pleasure, so easily accessible, that we actually need this quick hit in dopamine just to feel normal, just to function like a normal human being. And that's, if you've got ADHD, that becomes even more of a struggle, because what we're exposed to in today's world is constant fast hitting dopamine. And there's a book called Dopamine Nation. Is the best book ever, that it really explains this pain to pleasure part of dopamine and how it's evolved, and what we can do about it and how we can truly understand it. So I'd really recommend, if you want to dig deeper into what dopamine is, to go and get that book. So how does this show up in ADHD, and what has this got to do with the topic we're talking about today? When it comes to our interests, for example, and we notice that we get either really intensely focused in what it is we're doing, or we all of a sudden just lose interest. So it's like that all or nothing with, our interests. A lot of my clients will talk about starting hobbies and quitting them, or constantly quitting their jobs and getting bored of their work, or partners, for example. Now, that is at play. This is why we are seeing that with dopamine, because we physically cannot, engage in things that don't interest us, because we need the dopamine to stimulate us. We need more dopamine than most to stimulate us. And that actually brings me to something I came across from Dr. Hallowell, which was the reward deficiency syndrome. And he says people with ADHD really struggle with this because of their lack of dopamine. And it means we have to work harder to get happier, and especially in the mornings. So if you notice in the mornings that you struggle to get going, which I know many ADHDers do, this will be largely to do with the fact that you are retaining, or you hold, lower amounts of dopamine and are struggling from something called reward deficiency syndrome. This is also why we see our struggle with the ups and downs when it comes to our emotions, right? So imagine you get some dopamine. So maybe it's from vaping or on your screen, or maybe it's even from exercise, like good dopamine. But when we're in and we've got that nice level of dopamine and we feel like we're satisfied for that moment, we might be in a really good mood. All of a sudden, we will drop in dopamine. Like I said, we think that we can't retain it for as long, or we're not absorbing as much. So how long dopamine might last in a neurotypical brain is going to last a lot less in our brain. And it isn't just about the dopamine, because there is that 30% developmental delay in our executive function, which means we struggle with something called our working memory as part of that. And what does this not help us do? It doesn't help us future think. So, for example, it's now or never thinking. So when we go to, say yes to that holiday that we can't afford, or impulse buy that outfit that we can't afford, or say yes to that extra drink that we know we shouldn't have, or say yes to that substance that we know isn't going to be good for us, we are unable to future think in the way that others do, which leads us to make decisions in the moment that could really have a negative impact on our future. And another reason why I believe that we see this, intense need to chase highs of ADHD, and that is our lack of self-belief. So if you think about it, we know that we are a community that really struggle to believe in ourselves. We are full of self-doubt, which means we lack in confidence. And that means the things that give us that feel-good chemical dopamine, we're going to need more of and want more of. And it's that numbing, that unworthiness. And I know, for example, when I was drinking a lot and taking other substances, a lot of that was to silence down the noise, but also to numb that feeling of unworthiness a lot of the time, and give myself that confidence in the moment to be able to show up and overcome that anxiety, that internal anxiety that I felt. And also, even when it came to work and achieving, that all came down to wanting to feel like I was enough and prove that I was enough. So there's also that aspect of it. So if you mix that with the dopamine, that self-medicating chemically, with this self-belief, this lack of self-belief and lack of confidence, you have got a bit of a recipe for extreme behaviors, which can be really detrimental to someone's life. So what can we do about it? What can we do about this strong desire to chase more and more and more of what it is we want? Now, what I'm going to share today is a lot around, examples around mainly like substances and food and things like that. But you can actually apply this to almost anything when it comes to chasing highs. And what it starts with is awareness, right? So awareness of why you're doing it, which is what we've discussed today. So a lot to do around your ADHD, but also because we have ADHD and we have these lower levels of dopamine, we tend to work better, and this is what coaching is all about, in making changes when we have a why for what we are doing. So knowledge is power, and it's never been so true than when it comes to ADHD. So what I've noticed is when I've wanted to work with an addiction or something that I haven't got a good relationship with at the moment, and it feels very extreme, and I've gone into that extreme end of things, it's learning about it. So even if I don't stop the vice or I don't stop the behavior, I will hyper focus on learning everything about, say, if it was drink, going sober, or if it was something to do with my relationships. I remember just reading loads of books around divorce and affairs, and to really understand what it is that's going on in my brain when it comes to, the vice or the behavior that I want to work with. It felt very important to me to understand why would I want to make this change. And I know I'm not alone on this, because this is exactly what the heart of my coaching is. We see clients and we see our community really have this need to understand why they are doing something, to make the transformation, to make the change, or to step forward and even have the motivation to work with it. Knowledge is power. Go into research, deep dive, use that hyper focus in a really positive way to really understand what it is you're working with. And that might even be just now hyper focusing on what dopamine is and how it's affecting you and your behavior in life. So maybe starting there after this episode today. Sorry to interrupt, but are you sick and tired of trying to untangle the chaos in your ADHD brain alone? I hear you. I know firsthand that it is not easy, which is why I have my own ADHD coach and community by my side. And you can too. Imagine having someone there guiding you and supporting you through the chaos and cheering you on every single step of the way. You don't have to go it alone anymore. For more information, head over to untangledco.com and book your free discovery call with me. Now, before we finish up, I want to share with you a little practical, framework that I also use. So this is on the more practical side of things, and it's called HIGH. So there's 4 little stages to it. So I'm just going to briefly go through it, and it's something that has really helped me, and some of it might make you laugh, but honestly, it's worked. So H is for hold off. So delay your dopamine in the morning. So it's really important how we start our day when it comes to our dopamine can change everything. Really trying your best to not have screens or phones the first thing that you look at or do in the morning, because as soon as you get that hit of dopamine, that quick hitting bad dopamine, all your brain's going to want to do for the rest of the day is get more of the same. So if you can delay, just even, really build it up slowly. It could be like 10 minutes longer than you may have to start with for a week. Really delay that dopamine, and instead the first dopamine that you should be receiving in the morning should be a kind of dopamine you've had to work for, like a cold shower or exercise or even doing a chore of some sort. So really focus on how you start your day. How can you delay that hard, quick, bad dopamine every morning? And you will notice the effects of that really quickly. My clients notice that so quickly when we do that. I is for intentional choices. So just getting high on your own supply. So really having access and starting to be intentional and notice where where you can bring more of that good dopamine, that dopamine you've got to work for, into your life. And actually, it can even be music is good dopamine, right? You can still access that quickly, but it's not going to leave you feeling crap after. So is the high worth the low, is what you want to start asking yourself with that intention, and creating that dopamine menu. So something that has that good dopamine that you can go to in those moments that you feel more triggered to go and grab that hard, bad dopamine. And then there's G, get supports. This is where you want to get your accountability. And what that really helps is creating a community or a friend that might be going through the same and is wanting to work with some kind of behavior. then working with them and sharing your experiences, because that is going to really help you alleviate that shame and addictive behaviors, or, connect with others who aren't going to judge you, who might be going through the same or have gone through the same. So we're more likely to be successful in this if others know about what it is we're trying to do. And H is for hurdles in place. This is my favorite one. Create small barriers to gain that, again, bad dopamine or the quick fixes. And that could be putting your phone in one of those. I know my clients have those boxes, lock boxes, at certain points in your day. For me, at the moment, I've got that addiction to that 100% dark chocolate again. So I leave it in my local cafe and I have to walk there to get a few squares of chocolate every day instead of having it in the house, because I know I'm going to go through the whole bar within about half an hour. So where can you put hurdles in place to delay that dopamine a little bit more and make it harder for you to get? So before we finish up and wrap this up, I want to bring our attention to the strengths that can come from our restlessness and our need to chase highs in the way that we do. And I really believe when we can channel this need to have more, do more, we can really create some magic and, actually live more fulfilling lives in many ways. And I was thinking about it this morning. I actually think that this restlessness and this need for more can often be the antidote that we need for that perfectionism that we all can really relate to with ADHD. Because when I have been more impulsive, I've sort of let go of that fear of failure in the moment and just gone for things instead of, overthinking it and will it be perfect? Will it be good enough? Doesn't mean it doesn't happen after. But ultimately it's allowed us to step into arenas without that procrastination, for example, at times. So here's a few examples of the things that I thought I'm thankful for that I could think of this morning when it comes to chasing highs with ADHD. So first one is the adventures that I've been on around the world, and in particular, a spontaneous trip that I went to in LA. So I just started a new job, and I think LA is like an 8-hour time difference, maybe more. And I'd realised that Dr. Dre was playing at Coachella Festival, and my sister had gone there with her boyfriend, and I impulsively booked it without asking my boss at first, and couldn't really afford it. Could potentially have lost my brand new job. Because he said, when he did say yes, that I had to be back at my desk by Monday morning. So I went, had the best time ever, got off the plane and literally had to go straight to my job. And I mean, I was absolutely knackered and doing a terrible job of it. But now, where I am in life, and I didn't lose my job at the time, it wasn't a really good first impression. But that's one of the best memories I've got with my sisters. So yes, I couldn't really afford it at the time. And I'm not saying just go and spend your money and travel and don't have money to eat and lose your job. But it really did bring a lot of joy to my life and is a long memory, a long lasting memory that we all talk about all the time. Also, just last year, I signed up for a charity cycle from London to Amsterdam for ADHD charities. As a group, we raised around £16,000. Now, I had no cycling experience. I got my bike the night before that was way too big for me, and I didn't even have the right trainers, the right coat. I had to actually stop off on the cycle to go and grab all of those things. But this impulsivity allowed me to, again, experience something that will be a memory that lasts a lifetime, but also do some real good in the world and give back. So that was something I thought about this morning. And then the last thing I thought of was that time when I quit my corporate job, I sold my house and left my relationship to start this business, and went and shared, did a flat share for the first time, had a kid's bed and my desk next to the kid's bed, and was working from my bedroom, and literally impulsively left everything I knew to start this business. That was all due to the fact that I needed something more meaningful, and I knew that the work that I was doing was just so soul destroying, and also was that impulsivity to go and, want that and not think about it. So those are 3 things that I thought of this morning that I'm really thankful for when it comes to this need to chase highs in our lives. And I'd like you to think of some. I'd like you to end this episode really trying to think of what is it you're thankful for your brain's need to be dopamine driven and need more. And that said, here is a little wrap up of what we spoke about a lot. Takeaways. Number 1, learn more about dopamine and how it affects your brain. Buy Dopamine Nation, whether you listen to it on Audible or you read books, it is honestly the best book on dopamine. Start adding good dopamine where you can, and especially in the morning. So just start small bit of good dopamine in the mornings. Create more meaning in your life. So find something that feels more important than maybe the behavior or the vice that feels a bit more negative in your life, and focus your attention there instead of, the more negative behavior. Be kind to yourself. Remember, you're not alone, and you're not a bad person for struggling with this intense need to chase highs. And remember, by feeling bad about it, you're actually just going to make this need to chase it even worse, because addiction or unhealthy relationships with vices or, any kind of high lives in shame. So remember, it's not helpful. And last but not least, you are not doomed for a life of chaos just because you have a dopamine driven brain. Not at all. And we are all in this together, and it can be different. Your relationship with this need for more can be different and can be used in a way that feels more fulfilling and positive and meaningful to you. Now, if you want extra support around maybe addiction and ADHD, there is an amazing guy called Colin Pattison who has created something called the ADHD CAF, which has a big focus on ADHD and addiction and support for those who struggle with addictive behaviours with ADHD. And I think the company is actually called the Oasis Partnership. So he's on LinkedIn. Check him out. He's amazing. Before we end, I want to share a little poem with you that I've been sent so many bloody times in my lifetime. And I've also shared in my community many times. And it is called The Tale of the Girl Who Didn't Stop. Let me tell you the tale of the girl who didn't stop, who climbed every mountain without a pause upon the top. She danced until each blade of grass was clothed in drops of dew, and the sun knew her by name, but the silver moon did too. For a fear had settled in her bones, a fear of sitting still, that if you're not moving forward, it must mean you never will. So in time, her dance got slower, and she looked at all she'd seen and found gaps inside the places that she'd never fully been. For she was a human doing, a human moving, a human seeing, but she'd never taken the time to simply be a human being. I love that poem so much. And it really does bring attention to the fact what this need for more can take away from us. And I think ADHD actually takes this very thing away from us the most, and that is presence and enjoying what it is we have. So whatever you can do to bring yourself back into the moment and to that place of gratitude, then do it. And that's what this is all about. Just coming back to being grateful for what it is we have and where we're at now. So that's it from me. Please do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, because we're now on YouTube. And let me know if you're enjoying these Tangled In episodes, and if you are, what it is you would like me to untangle with you. I'm always really open to hear what it is that you want to hear from the podcast and want to get from these podcasts. So with that said, lots of love and strength. Let's get untangled. Thank you so much for joining me on the ADHD Untangled podcast. I hope that these episodes are inspiring you to step forward with confidence despite the struggles that you face with ADHD. If you want to find out more about ADHD coaching, retreats, trainings, then check out my Instagram, ADHD_Untangled, or my website, untangledco.com. Let's get untangled and show the world what we are made of.